Apex Express, Asian Pacific Expression.
Community and cultural coverage,
Music and calendar,
new visions and voices.
coming to you with an Asian Pacific Islander point of view.
It's time to get on board the Apex Express.
Hello and welcome. You are tuning in to Apex Express, a weekly radio show uplifting the voices and stories of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. I'm your host, Miata Tan. Tonight, we're focusing on South Asian communities and the organizers working to build political power. South Asians are one of the fastest growing racial groups in the United States, over 6 million people and roughly a quarter of the Asian American population. South Asian is used as a broad umbrella term for people with roots in countries such as India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and sometimes Afghanistan. The exact definitions can vary across communities and organizations. And as we'll talk about tonight, within the South Asian diaspora who call the United States home, you have a mix of nationalities, religion, immigration status, and more. Tonight, I'm joined by 4 people working to address the issues impacting South Asian communities in the US and beyond. At a time when questions of belonging, safety, and political power continue to shape immigrant communities across the country, South Asian organizers are building new forms of solidarity while also grappling with the diversity and complexity within their own communities. The first voice you'll hear is Sabiha Basrai. Sabiha is the daughter of Muslim Gujarati immigrants and has been organizing with the Bay Area-based Alliance of South Asians Taking Action, or ASATA, since 2009. Here's Sabiha helping us to understand how South Asian political organizing has evolved in the United States, especially in the post-9/11 era.
Thanks for the opportunity to do some reflection. This year marks the 25th anniversary of 9/11, which was a political flashpoint that absolutely changed my life because I was a 19-year-old college student trying to figure out a lot of things about how the world works and my place in it and my own identity and the multiple identities I hold. And also where my responsibilities lied in solidarity, not just with other Muslims who were being targeted, but our broad immigrant diasporas and allies who have experienced discrimination in different forms from the state. So thinking about the ways in which organizing happened in the months and years after 9/11 to support immigrant rights, that was really a time in which new projects formed or existing projects kind of found a new focus. ASATA, as an organizing project, as a group of volunteers, has both done things like shown up to support folks being called up for the NCR's special registration program and also participate in direct action protests in solidarity against the war, and has continued to be part of coalitional work regionally in the Bay Area. And, more recently, when we think about the ways in which our communities are under increased pressure with the Trump administration's immigrant policies, there have been also opportunities to build more relationships and make sure that as we advocate for our community's rights, we're doing so in formation with others, not just focusing on one particular bad piece of legislation, but connecting that to a larger story to really build towards liberation for all of us. I'll just add, too, that those relationships that were kind of seeded and invested in that moment of crisis and anxiety and fear have endured in many ways to now. The fact that that very ecosystem is actually growing in this moment is a testament to the relationships that were built in those days.
That was Sabiha Basrai, grounding us in the history of South Asian political organizing in the US. As she mentioned, for many South Asians, 9/11 marked a particularly mobilizing moment, one that helped how communities organized and built solidarity. To help us better understand how that moment influenced the evolution of progressive South Asian activism, we now turn to Deepa Iyer, a South Asian American writer, strategist, and lawyer. Deepa leads projects on solidarity and social movements at Building Movement Project and brings more than 25 years of experience in Asian American organizing and advocacy.
I think that I would say that there were, looking back, a couple of trends and themes that we can pull out from that time. One is that there was definitely a shift in the general consciousness of South Asian communities about our place in American society, our understanding of racism, Islamophobia, and also the role of the state. And so we had a situation where both hate violence and state violence were actually being endured by South Asian Muslim Arab communities. And so I think that there was a shift in the ways in which our communities began to think about ourselves in the United States. A second piece is the growth of a field, an ecosystem of South Asian organizations in the wake of the attacks and the global war on terror. So we began to see a lot of groups that were actually formed or becoming more staffed up in the weeks and months after 9/11. For example, the Sikh Coalition was actually birthed the evening of the attacks. And an organization that I was close to, SALT, was also emerging and forming in the months after 9/11 as well. So we began to see that a field was growing. And the third sort of theme I would point out that Sabiha alluded to is this sense of solidarity, that instead of sort of being siloed as, South Asians working within just our communities and just talking about certain specific issues, there was a real sense that we needed to collaborate and build bridges with Arab, Muslim, Sikh, and Black communities in the United States to understand the trajectory of racism and xenophobia and how they were all kind of coming together in the weeks after 9/11. Those three themes and trends are what, when I look back, I see coming up over and over again in our messaging and in our advocacy.
That was Deepa Iyer. As you heard from Deepa, collaboration across movements was essential in helping South Asian communities to understand and respond to the waves of xenophobia in the wake of 9/11. Now we turn to Rajiv Narayan and Farah Mahesri, who lead national policy work at the Alliance of South Asians Taking Action, or ASATA. Together, they launched and now co-lead ASATA's new political base building group, ASATA Power. Rajiv begins by reflecting on what South Asian communities are facing today and what has and hasn't changed since 9/11.
I think unfortunately, many of the challenges present in the early 2000s remain today. They take new form, some have evolved and transformed, but they existed in much the same form following 9/11. One of the instances in which I learned about that is at the recent South Asian Coalition convening, where we did this exercise in mapping a number of historical and present day events, as well as a future vision of things that are important to our organizations and to our movements. And something that we reflected on together in the convening is that a number of these attacks on our communities have waxed and waned at different periods in time, dating back to the 1960s and truly even at the beginning of the 19th century and the late 18th century. And so to answer your question specifically, in the early 2000s, like Deepa and Sabiha mentioned, we dealt with an incredible expression of Islamophobia, of anti-brown and anti-Black racism and hate speech. There was in general, a skepticism and unwelcoming of South Asian communities. And unfortunately, with the current federal administration and political discourse in our country, a number of those same themes are relevant today and take on similar forms, whether they're in response to what the federal administration is doing in countries like Iran or previous administrations have done in Afghanistan or Pakistan. I think all of those events underscore all the more so that it's important for our organizations to organize together, much as we did in the early 2000s, to address these harms, to remember what they look like at previous stages of history, and to try to prevent them again from happening in the future.
Farah, perhaps you could speak a bit to the organizing. What did that look like a few years ago, and what does that look like today? How has that changed?
Rajiv and I started ASATA Power a couple of years ago, specifically to be able to look forward, to practice radical imagination and fight for not just protection of our communities, which we will always do. That is built into our DNAs. It's what we know. It's how we move. And also to fight for things that we want, to build the world that we want to live in. so that we're not constantly caught in these cycles. And as we're doing that, we are learning a lot about how organizing is happening today. The BLM movement, Black Lives Matter, and the incredible street power, but also that movement's ability to change our national discourse and change what is baseline, what we should be demanding, and how we are visioning a future that is built on policies, governance, and hard material changes in our lives is profound. Beyond that, also, the Palestine solidarity movement over the last couple of years has rewritten every book about organizing. And so I think that it is an interesting moment of both a little bit of sadness, to be honest, that we are still fighting some of these same fights and we are still in some of these same dynamics that we have been for 25 years, and the profound opportunity that we have to build power and to look forward. And I think that is more true in the Bay Area than it is almost everywhere else. Because of what our workforce looks like, because of the sheer amount of wealth that is accumulated in this little corner of our world. And also when you look around at the political power and people who hold political power or are running for political power and elected office around the Bay Area, you really start to see not just how South Asians are increasingly politicized and increasingly looking to build electoral and political power, but also very specifically progressive political power. And so when you look to Congress now, the Progressive Caucus is full of South Asian progressives who are leading the charge, who are doing some of this critical work. That's part of our organizing strategy, is to be part of those conversations and to continue to push and to continue to, again, advocate for policies and changes at that big level to make the future we want possible.
I love that. Coming together to dream and really fight. Rajiv, you are leading this work at the Alliance of South Asians Taking Action. Can you speak more to why the Bay Area is a distinct microcosm in this progressive South Asian movement?
Of course. So Sabiha and I lead that work together at ASATA Power, and ASATA is sort of a political power building project within the auspices of ASATA, which has been operating in the Bay Area for more than 25 years now. I think what makes the Bay Area a microcosm of the South Asian diaspora is a tremendous amount of diversity and a set of interrelated intersectional challenges. So you have folks of South Asian descent with all different immigration histories. So I'm, for example, a person who has birthright citizenship in the United States. I was born here, but there are folks who immigrated here, like my parents, and had to attain their citizenship through the U.S. legal system. And folks beyond that who are refugees or asylees or are undocumented due to a variety of political and social and economic pressures. And so we all coexist in the same space across an economic gradient. So there are folks who are very well compensated in the tech sectors and healthcare sectors, sometimes characterized as part of a model minority myth as representatives of the South Asian diaspora within the San Francisco Bay Area and the United States broadly. And then there are a whole variety of South Asians who are working in less well-compensated, often quite exploited industries. For example, in care industries, as people who are providing child care or senior care services, people who are working in the restaurant industry, folks who are lesser compensated within healthcare, as well as in tech industries and other ways. Of course, those economic positions interact with the political and legal system. So, for example, even if a person might be well compensated in a tech job in the Bay Area, which they attained by way of an H-1B visa, that person might be subject to exploitative labor conditions based on the legal configuration of how H-1B visas are treated. For example, that you depend on your employer for your immigration status in this country, which changes the worker-employer relationship in a way that makes it very difficult to identify workplace abuses. Beyond that, we also have a diverse range of South Asians across the age gradient. So we have folks who are quite young, who are in Gen Z and are entering politics in a completely different way than somebody like myself or Deepa entered politics earlier in our lives and experience it today, which provides an opportunity for us to learn from earlier generations and to also share lessons from our political experience. So like with many things, the Bay Area has it all, the good and the bad, and ASATA and ASATA Power work within that space to identify opportunities for solidarity.
That was Rajiv Narayan and Farah Mahesri. Through their work with the Alliance of South Asians Taking Action, or ASATA, Rajiv and Farah are helping to build South Asian political power here in the Bay Area and nationwide. The ASATA team and all four of our guests tonight are connected through the South Asian Coalition, a network of local and national organizations focused on advancing policy issues affecting South Asian communities and building shared spaces for strategy and collaboration. To better understand this evolving movement of progressive South Asian action, let's return to Deepa Iyer, who shares how and why this coalition came together.
Yeah, I really appreciate Rajiv bringing up how what is happening in the Bay Area is part of a larger movement. And what I would say about this ecosystem, this field that I talked about earlier, and I've been able to understand this through the course of the work I've done, but also a book I've written about post 9/11 America, is that so much happens on the coasts. And we often forget that there are organizations and our communities that are really growing in other parts of the country, right? I grew up in Kentucky, and there are places like Kentucky and Indiana where you are seeing more South Asians settle and build their lives there. So one of the things that I think has been important in thinking about as we come up on this 25th anniversary of 9/11 is how our coalition of South Asian groups, how that field has grown with these additional organizations in geographic areas that are different, as well as the ways in which folks are organizing. So now we've got, for example, groups that are working with Bhutanese refugees or Nepali-speaking community members, or groups that are organizing around the exploitation of community members based on caste. These are really important movement interventions and organizations that are growing. One of the key aspects of network infrastructure is the ability to connect with each other. Not to flatten our experiences and say we're all the same, but to actually find some threads of commonality in our shared struggle and our experiences, and to also know that together as collectives, as Farah mentioned earlier, we can actually build the futures that we want to see. One of the really, I think, inspiring pieces of coalition building that I've been fortunate to work with and support, along with everyone here, is the South Asian Coalition, which is this emergent network of now 35 organizations around the country. And this coalition really seeks to build relationships and strengthen relationships, engage in peer learning and skills building, make it clear that there are certain policy issues that we need to uplift and to advocate around, and to create opportunities and pathways for solidarity with larger movements. This coalition and the infrastructure that it's been creating is a way for us to look at our ecosystem of South Asian organizing in this moment and to really see what happens when we galvanize our power collectively.
And Deepa, can you share a bit about the various co-conveners that make up the South Asian Coalition?
So the South Asian Coalition, as we've mentioned, is this emergent network of groups that address various issues but are aligned around shared values. And the groups that really came together to co-convene it include ASATA Power, as well as Muslims for Just Futures, Raksha, which is an organization in the South, and Manavi, which is based in New Jersey. And these four organizations really had the vision to set up this structure for the coalition. The organization where I work at, Building Movement Project, supports the coalition through infrastructure. So providing facilitation, providing resources, policy analysis, and creating the container to support movements in that way, which is so critical for coalitions.
That was Deepa Iyer, a South Asian American writer, strategist, and lawyer. After the break, we'll hear more from organizers and advocates working to address issues shaping South Asian communities today. Stay with us.
Sip on joy, the purest drink. Move to make, thought to think. They can feel us from afar. Avenues and boulevard. White collar cannibal, what you gonna do? Everyone's attending, so who you gonna choose? I will not equivocate. If that's all, let's celebrate. Fever issue, I will not drop it. Power cowards never stop it. I have nurtured you, corrupted. I am erupting, don't interrupt it. Careful, I'm an animal, trap. First of the secondary class. You know I don't trust you, that's the catch. Don't you fucking touch me, I will nash. Cause I am an old phenomenon, and I am an old phenomenon. Show them we believe, see the unforeseen. Sharpen canine teeth, get those ringside seats. When the scorched of the earth come back by sea. Sip on joy, the purest drink. Move to make, thought to think. They can feel us from afar. Avenues and boulevards. I've been so politely at the bottom. Pull it tight, bootstrap, strap it on top. I've been so politely at the bottom. Pull it tight, bootstrap, strap it on top. I've been so politely at the bottom. 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 But I am an old phenomenon. But I am an old phenomenon. But I am an old phenomenon. But I am an old phenomenon.
That was Phenom by Thao and the Get Down, Stay Down. You are tuned into Apex Express on 94.1 KPFA, a weekly radio show uplifting the voices and stories of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. I'm your host, Miata Tan. Tonight, I'm joined by 4 people who are working to address the issues impacting South Asian communities in the US and beyond. Back in March, organizers, advocates, and community leaders from across the country gathered in Washington, D.C. for a national convening focused on the challenges and possibilities facing South Asian communities today. Here's Sabiha Basrai with the Alliance of South Asians Taking Action, or ASATA. She speaks about how this coalition of progressive South Asian groups formed and why this moment called for it.
So this new emergent South Asian coalition had its first convening in Washington, D.C. in March. And this was the culmination of a little over a year of monthly Zoom calls, which started because we knew we were on the verge of a Trump reelection. We knew that there was this ecosystem of South Asian activism and organizing across the country. Some of us knew each other from previous collaborations, but some of us didn't. New organizations were forming, and there was this recognition that we need each other in order to face what's coming, and we are stronger together. And we know that being South Asian is not a monolith, that we deal with harms within our own communities based on labor exploitation, caste discrimination, anti-Muslim violence. And when we talk to each other, when we connect, we give ourselves the best chance at being able to move through those pieces of pain and build towards a future where we can all feel a sense of belonging, feel represented, and an agency in shaping that future together. So what started with a few conversations with a few folks grew steadily and through some intentional work to kind of invite each other in, which is, of course, an ongoing process. We were able to unite under this umbrella called the South Asian Coalition. We committed to some shared political points of unity and kind of community agreements to really set some expectations with one another on how we could move well in formation, and made sure we had pathways to share information with each other so that someone like me working in Oakland could understand what someone working in Texas or in Georgia was facing, what local policy positions they were needing to navigate. And we could give each other advice, give each other moral support, and also sharpen our political understandings. So these kind of regular check-ins was one way of just understanding what we were all facing and feeling connected. But actually being together in person was remarkable. I cannot overstate how much of a difference it makes to be able to share space and see each other as whole people and not just representatives of a particular organization or a particular issue area, and have those in-between moments where we actually build some friendships. One of the things that was also really important for me to understand when we met together was just how important that intergenerational work is. We had folks in the room who were in their 50s and 60s who had been doing this work for decades. And we had folks in the room who were in their 20s for whom 9/11 was something that happened in history. The conversations that were happening across generations informed the way that we think about ourselves as a coalition and helped me also to let go of some of the constraints that kept my imagination small about what we were capable of. I was really grateful that so many people attended and chose to prioritize that work. It's hard, to take a pause from the daily work to leave, fly to DC, take those risks as well, because for many of us, going through TSA is no small thing. There's a lot of harassment and racism that still permeate, these institutions. So not to minimize just the effort that it takes to convene and really make the most of our time together. One of the things that we did while we were in DC together was hold a congressional briefing to really amplify and share the issues that were coming up for our communities that folks were already working very hard on.
That was Sabiha Basrai with the Alliance of South Asians Taking Action, or ASATA. Now let's return to Rajiv Narayan, another member of the ASATA team and co-lead of their political action group, ASATA Power. Rajiv would take you inside the congressional briefing that Sabiha mentioned and how South Asian organizers from across the country shared the issues shaping their communities and what support is needed now.
We in ASATA Power worked in collaboration with a number of the organizations in the South Asian Coalition to put together a congressional briefing on the issue of South Asians and immigration in the heart of Washington, D.C., in the halls of Congress in Capitol Hill. And we were fortunate to do so in collaboration with Representatives Pramila Jayapal and Grace Meng. We had a number of speakers representing different perspectives and political struggles within the South Asian space in the United States, especially as it relates to immigration. So, for example, we had representatives from the Dalit Solidarity Forum talking about the plight of oppressed workers, caste-oppressed workers in New Jersey working in a Hindu temple.
I stand here as a Dalit, formerly known as an untouchable in India's caste system, speaking for over 200 skilled Dalit artisans who were brought to the US from India to build the largest Hindu temple in New Jersey. In their words, "We are the Indian stone workers of America, workers rescued by the FBI in 2021 from forced labor conditions constructing the Baptist Temple in New Jersey. We were brought to the US on R1 visas and compelled to perform construction labor for over 87 hours a week and paid just $1.20 an hour."
We heard from the executive director of the Sikh Coalition talking about Sikh truck drivers and religious workers and their experience under the federal regime's rulemaking efforts.
Punjabi Sikhs began entering the U.S. trucking industry in large numbers during the 1980s, and Sikh truck drivers and business owners have played a critical role in addressing driver shortages over the past several years. Unfortunately, Sikhs in this critical industry have become the subject of harmful rhetoric and policy from this current administration. These drivers are being excluded solely because of their specific immigration status, and regardless of their driving histories, skills, knowledge, or English proficiency.
We heard from the executive director of Asian Refugees United, who spoke about the experience of Bhutanese refugees who have been rendered stateless by the current administration's deportation efforts.
Because of the ethnic cleansing campaign of Bhutan government, more than 100,000 Bhutanese citizens were forced to flee the country. For 20 years, I lived in a refugee camp in Nepal. In 2008, the government of this country came to rescue us. We were promised safety and security, but last year, that promise was broken. As of March 2025, over 70 of our community members are deported to Bhutan, the same country that persecuted us and made us refugees. These community members are kidnapped from their homes and jobs. They have been taken from their routine ICE check-ins. We know due process was not followed.
We also heard from the executive director of Raksha, a domestic violence organization based in the southern United States that has played an instrumental role in supporting South Asians who have been the victims and who are not survivors of domestic and intimate partner violence, about the needs for supporting these kinds of organizations with federal dollars and through the grant-making system's conditions.
For 30 years, we have supported community members in navigating interpersonal violence, but also waves of racism and policy backlash. South Asian and Indo-Caribbean survivors need safe places to turn. Safe places that speak their language, understand their unique immigration and cultural needs. Raksha recently had $700,000 in OVC grants terminated by DOJ. Additionally, we are still waiting for OVW sexual assault cultural funds for 5 months where we have gotten no determination of whether we're getting that funding or not. 5 months.
We also heard from the director of the South Asian American Justice Collaborative, which is currently before the U.S. Supreme Court in the birthright citizenship case, and filed this foundational amicus brief detailing the story of South Asians in the United States going back to the 1600s.
Our brief pushes back against this notion that we are forever foreign. South Asians actually arrived on these shores in the 1600s, and by the 1700s, South Asians were already asserting their rights here. In 1861, an Afghan immigrant actually fought in the Civil War in the Union Army. By the late 19th century, the largest farming group in Central California was formed by Punjabis. Today, South Asians are one of the largest immigrant populations in the U.S., but many families are caught in immigration backlogs that last for decades and make them vulnerable to the president's executive order restricting birthright citizenship.
Across all of these speakers, the message became very clear that we have so many different struggles, but they're all united by a sense of solidarity for each other's political experiences under the same system of exploitation and oppression, and that there's so much that Congress can do in this moment to support the South Asian diaspora in the United States and even abroad in some cases. For ASATA Power's part, we had the opportunity to put together over the course of the last year a policy brief on undocumented South Asians. And it was during the congressional briefing that we shared some pretty startling statistics that we collected and collated from a number of public sources. And so what we were able to identify for the room is that there are about 800,000 to 900,000 undocumented South Asians in the United States. And because there are only 6.5 million South Asians in the US, both those who are undocumented and those who have birthright citizenship or are otherwise naturalized, refugees and asylees, and everyone in between. Of those 6.5 million South Asians, 1 in 8 of them is undocumented, which is shocking and not something that somebody would understand at the outset, given these problematic narratives like the model minority myth and whatever you see these days on X or Twitter about South Asian immigrants. So it's important for us not only to set the narrative straight and to identify both the diversity and opportunity for solidarity across such struggles, but to do so in the halls of power and to speak that truth to power directly.
That's Rajiv with ASATA Power, reflecting on a recent congressional briefing in Washington, D.C. he helped to organize alongside other progressive South Asian leaders, organizers, and activists. Here's a snippet of Rajiv's opening remarks at the briefing.
I want to draw your attention to the slides behind me. They'll show a couple of images of South Asian community members who've been impacted recently by the horrific policies and practices of the federal administration. These members include Shiraz Fatehali Sachwani, a 48-year-old citizen of Pakistan who died in ICE detention last December. They include 73-year-old Harjeet Kaur, who was arrested during a routine ICE check-in, separated from her family, and deported to India without notice. I should say, I grew up seeing Harjeet Kaur behind the counter at Sari Palace in Berkeley. She would help my mom try on saris. Her home was here. Her community was here. These are just some of the names and stories of community members who have been affected by immigration policy as of late, and we hope that you will keep them in mind as you hear from our speakers today. There are many more we were not able to picture or name, but their stories are just as important. We'll be making many asks over the course of today's briefing. Some of those include the following. Congress should not increase funding for ICE or Border Patrol, including providing funds for detention facilities, especially in this funding moment. We have to remember that ICE is not a long-standing American institution. It was created in 2002 recently as part of the Homeland Security Act following 9/11.
That was Rajiv Narayan with ASATA Power speaking at a recent congressional briefing in Washington, D.C. The briefing was part of a larger national convening organized by the South Asian Coalition, bringing together progressive South Asian groups from across the country. Now let's return to Deepa Iyer, who leads projects on solidarity and social movements at Building Movement Project. Here's Deepa reflecting on her takeaways from the congressional briefing.
I think that there were so many pieces in that briefing that maybe people didn't know about, that organizations are struggling with. And part of it is that our communities, and Sabiha said this earlier, not a monolith, right? And there are so many different ways in which we are experiencing what is happening right now in the United States, the fractures and the fissures that we're seeing. Rajiv spoke so well about the community needs and issues. One thing I'll lift up is actually the impact on nonprofit organizations. Several of the groups that were speaking at the briefing noted how the attacks on nonprofits that are specifically working on issues like immigration, in terms of losing federal funding and grants, being forced to certify that they are not addressing issues that deal with undocumented immigrants, as well as the ways in which nonprofit organizations are being, in some ways, seen as doing risky and un-American work. There is the exploitation of domestic terrorism as a frame that is being used right now to target certain nonprofit organizations. This is something that I think is not necessarily known to many people in terms of the ways in which national security, immigration issues are also affecting the nonprofit sector as a whole. And where I work at the Building Movement Project, we really look at the nonprofit sector and the health of the nonprofit sector. And we're seeing that these types of external threats, the spotlight on organizations that are on the front lines, including South Asian groups, Muslim groups, Palestinian groups that are working with immigrant communities, queer and trans community members that are providing vital language access, service provision, community safety, are really under threat right now. And this includes many of the organizations that were present at the coalition's convening. So that's something that I also want to lift up, that in addition to our communities who are facing the impact of the current moment in really acute ways, our nonprofit sector and our organizations are also dealing with a range of constraints and threats and difficulties. So that is one thing that came up over and over again.
That was Deepa Iyer with the Building Movement Project, highlighting the pressures facing the nonprofit sector right now, especially as it relates to South Asian organizers, advocates, and communities. Let's return to Farah Mahesri with ASATA Power.
One of the other things that I am very proud of for this congressional briefing that we did was that it was us telling our own stories and us presenting our own policy recommendations. There was no need to have like an expert come in and talk on behalf of our communities or try to represent our communities. We were the experts in the room, and we were really recognized and seen as that. As Rajiv mentioned, the room was packed with Hill staffers and congressional staffers who were taking diligent notes as we spoke our truths.
That was Farah Mahesri with ASATA Power, reflecting on the recent congressional briefing she helped to organize, one that brought greater visibility to the experiences of South Asian immigrants. You'll hear more on how South Asian activists, organizers, and community groups are mobilizing after this. Stay with us.
A star not guessed, simply because I'm best. What have you got to get? I know there's plenty yet. The nationwide search is upon us, I'm a sight to see. They said I polish and astonish, and so why not me? And then they said it's complicated and some wah. I made the map and put you on it, pay me handsomely. I wanna do more than just feed us. Wanna lift
That was Lion on the Hunt by Thao and the Get Down Stay Down. You are tuned into Apex Express on 94.1 KPFA, a weekly radio show uplifting the voices and stories of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. I'm your host, Miata Tan. Tonight, we're talking about South Asian organizing in the United States and how community leaders are responding to immigration challenges, political representation, and the shifting landscape of civil rights. Back in March, organizers and advocates from across the country gathered in Washington, D.C. for a national convening focused on the challenges and possibilities facing South Asian communities today. Here's Rajiv Narayan with the Alliance of South Asians Taking Action, or ASATA, reflecting on the importance of honoring both the diversity of the South Asian diaspora and the shared struggle that connects these communities.
Something I appreciate about your work here, Miata, at Apex Express is to highlight both that diversity of the South Asian diaspora and the many struggles and experiences that unite our political experiences and our commitment to social justice. It used to be, and in some places it still is the case, that folks will use an overbroad group to represent all of the South Asian diaspora. For example, talking about all brown people as Indian or Desi, or to collapse all the differences in our community. And part of the power of the congressional briefing is that we are able to show that what it means to be South Asian is at once an incredibly diverse expression and at the same time a collective expression of solidarity. We can do two of these things at the same time. We can recognize our differences and fight for each other. One of my favorite takeaways that I heard from Deepa at the briefing is that there are some staffers that came up to her and said, I've never heard my story, my experience, my political struggles represented in a panel in this building in front of other congressional staffers. And that's something that we can do and we should do more of. There are so many ways in which we can tell the stories and highlight the campaigns of folks from different parts of the South Asian diaspora who are all fighting for a better life for all of us.
That was Rajiv Narayan with ASATA. In the recent congressional briefing that Rajiv helped to organize through the South Asian Coalition, organizers also pointed toward the future of South Asian organizing in the United States and the role of a new generation shaping it. Back to Deepa Iyer with Building Movement Project.
Some of the young folks that are entering or working at nonprofits now, supporting South Asian nonprofits, don't have a living memory of 9/11 and the global war on terror. And they have been politicized in different ways, right? Over the last 8 years, for example, the pandemic, global wars, etc. And so there are a couple of ways in which I've been thinking about how we can support South Asian young people. So, for example, how can we share historical analysis and political analysis so that young people understand that they are part of a trajectory of South Asian activism that actually started well before 9/11, before the 1960s, right? And that continues to today. So they don't feel fragmented. So that's something that I've been sitting with a lot. Another is around pathways into public service and community service and into the nonprofit sector. So how could we support young people in terms of building their skills, in having pathways open to them into our nonprofit organizations? And then finally, how do we support them so that they can do this work for the long run? You know, we all struggle with burnout. We all struggle with sustainability. What are some lessons learned that we can pass on? What are some best practices? That's something that's been sitting with me quite a bit since the gathering that we had. And I hope that the coalition will really think about supporting young people's leadership and finding different avenues and pathways to do that.
That was Deepa Iyer reflecting on how movements can better support the next generation of South Asian organizers. Within the South Asian Coalition, that work also means building long-term infrastructure for better collaboration. Now back to Sabiha Basrai with ASATA.
I'm also really appreciating that the South Asian Coalition is this model for creating a container for many, many organizations to unite as a group while maintaining regional focus and individual issue priorities. I also want to name that the place where I first learned how to do national coalition work was as a member of the National South Asian Coalition that ASATA had been part of. It was facilitated by a group called SALT, which played such a critical role in the post 9/11 era and continued to then work on DACA, creating resources for undocumented South Asians, along with other issues facing our diverse diasporas. And SALT closed a few years ago. It was a decision that I don't understand and has really left me with a lot of sadness and confusion. But I know that sometimes institutions do end, but that the work does not end and the relationships do not end. And the South Asian Coalition is this emergent space that is not led by any one organization. It is a space that is being invested in collectively. And we're really moving at the speed of trust so that we can be really laying that strong foundation that supports the work ahead. I'm really sitting with the ways in which sometimes this labor of building the container, creating the container, investing in the network, it's sometimes invisible labor, but it is the most critical because without it, we can have moments of mass mobilization, but then that wasn't actually building any power over the long term. And I'm really looking forward to all of the very good work ahead because I trust the relationships and the containers that we're building.
That was Sabiha, reflecting on the collaborative infrastructure that the South Asian Coalition is helping to build. Now let's return to Deepa Iyer. I asked Deepa what campaigns are on the horizon for the coalition, especially as this year marks 25 years since 9/11.
As Sabiha mentioned, the coalition is a space for invested leadership. And so there are lots of different campaigns that groups within the coalition are eyeing and taking on. One of them, Rajiv mentioned already, is the fight around birthright citizenship. And so there are groups like SAGCO and others that showed up with a South Asian delegation at the Supreme Court on April 1st when that case was being heard. And it was really great to see so many South Asians out there in a delegation along with other communities to raise their voices on this really vital, pivotal issue. And so that is a campaign that some of the groups within the coalition are going to continue to be lifting up as we get the results of that case and moving forward. Another one that you mentioned is around the 25th anniversary of 9/11. And there are groups that are considering, along with others in other movement spaces, what does narrative strategy look like as we go into this time period? How do we think about the fact that we're marking the 25th anniversary in the same year that we're marking the 250th anniversary of the United States, right? How do we use 9/11 and its anniversary as a lens through which we understand empire, through which we understand the ways in which domestic policies are being recirculated against other communities? And also this piece around awareness and education. This is an opportunity to share some of the personal experiences that many of us have around that moment in time, but also the ways in which our communities have built up themselves as well as the solidarity with other communities. So I think there are lots of ways in which organizations are thinking about that anniversary and how they can utilize that moment to draw greater attention to our community's experiences.
Rajiv, Farah, would you like to add anything about upcoming campaigns and how you're thinking about the South Asian political power movement moving forwards?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about one sort of continuing campaign, which is that, like I mentioned, we put together this policy brief on undocumented South Asians, and we have this great opportunity to circulate and talk about it on Capitol Hill in DC, but it's also important for us to bring that story home. And so part of what we'll be doing for the remainder of this year is identifying opportunities to do town halls, both with community members and potentially with elected officials to help educate, do political education about the nature of undocumented peoples in the South Asian community. A large part of what we did in that policy brief is to collate all these numbers to tell you how many folks might be undocumented, what is the proportion of undocumented people in the South Asian community. But an important, equally important contribution of that report is the nature of undocumented experiences. Why do people become undocumented? What are the factors that put them in that position? And what does it mean for a person to become undocumented? How can we support them, not just in different policy prescriptions, but also the ways that we talk about undocumented people and the South Asian community as a whole. So that'll be a focus that we have and a contribution that we hope to make both in the Bay Area and beyond.
I'll add to that it is election year. I feel like we say every election is a critical election, and I do believe that is very true this year. And so ASATA Power, as a political organization, will be making endorsements and talking through not just that it is important to vote, but it is really important and critical for us in this moment to vote for progressive candidates who are part of our, what is often called like a build coalition, who are here to help us build this world that we are dreaming of, who are aligned on policy positions. The other thing that we are working on locally and nationally is around the war budget. So as a group that has been so directly impacted by the global war on terror, 4.5 million Muslims around the world who have been killed by U.S. war making in that global war on terror, and just watching kind of what the United States foreign policy in particular over the last couple of years has been, we have a particular point of view and a particular interest on tracking and watching things like the largest request for a defense budget in U.S. history. How are those dollars being spent? And how those dollars that are being spent abroad to do war making are also having a boomerang effect and coming back to impact our communities at home. So the same technologies that were developed and used in war making through the global war on terror that impacted so many of our communities around the world for 25 years, a lot of that is the same technology that ICE is now using to go after undocumented South Asians in the United States, right? And so that's another way in which we really see our struggles are interconnected and that we are wanting to dismantle a lot of these systems of harm, and also, again, at that intersection between both hate violence and state oppression that's happening.
That was Bara Mahesri with ASATA and ASATA Power. As she shared, ASATA Power is focused on the midterm elections and how war spending and post-9/11 policies continue to affect South Asian communities today. To close out, we return to another ASATA organizer, Sabiha Basrai. So I wanted to bring the conversation back locally to the Bay Area again, and just thinking about the Alliance of South Asians Taking Action, which is part of a network of AAPI and Asian organizing in the Bay Area, as a space where progressive South Asians can actually build community, sharpen our political analysis, embrace our responsibilities here in the Bay Area in this political moment. And just also lifting up that ASATA currently is working on things like the Oakland arms embargo or local community defense against ICE, environmental justice projects, and also looking for more ways to fight supremacist ideologies of Hindutva, but in collaboration with anti-Zionist Jewish community activists. These are opportunities that we have here in the Bay Area. And also thinking about ways that we participate in mobilizations, like we show up for Reclaim MLK Day, International Working Women's Day, May Day, the Trans March every year, because we understand our responsibility to show up and to show up consistently. And so when I think about the South Asian Coalition and this moment of, okay, we've been building towards this convening and this congressional briefing, and now we're on the other side of this moment, and we are kind of reflecting and coming back together around how we maintain this energy. I also wanted to highlight some of the amazing work that many of our coalition members are already doing. One is Savera. So Savera United Against Supremacy is actually a coalition of work as well. They focused their energy on addressing Hindu nationalism and Hindutva ideology and the many ways in which this supremacist ideology is kind of insidiously part of institutions, policy, even cultural work within our diaspora. They're so committed to both like resisting the tides of hatred, but also combating all forms of supremacist politics and the intersections between them. So their work has been a big part of my political education, and I'm really glad that they're part of this coalition. Every member of the coalition is bringing analysis and experience that cross-pollinates to the rest of us. So I'm looking forward to just more of that. Also considering what ASATA's role is and how ASATA working in the Bay Area alongside so many other amazing organizing projects here can be strengthening those relationships nationally. That was Sabiha Basrai with the Alliance of South Asians Taking Action, or ASATA. This is Apex Express on 94.1 KPFA, a weekly radio show uplifting the voices and stories of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. Apex Express airs every Thursday evening at 7 p.m. And with that, we're at the end of our time here tonight. We really appreciate you for tuning in to listen, and a huge thank you to our wonderful guests. For a transcript of tonight's episode, please visit our website. That's kpfa.org/program/Apex Express. We've also added links on the episode page for tonight's show, so you can learn more about the South Asian Coalition, ASATA, and all of the organizations we've talked about tonight, along with their upcoming campaigns as well. Apex Express is produced by Ayama Keen Lee, Anush Vaida, Isabel Lee, Jalina Keen Lee, Miko Lee, Miata Tan, Preeti Mangala Shekar, and Shwati Rayasam. Tonight's show was produced by me, Miata Tan. Get some rest, Joe.
American historian, author, and leading scholar of racism and anti-racism, Ibram X. Kendi.
The major theory that's being used to get people to consent to their own domination is Great Replacement theory. This is a political theory that suggests that there are these globalist elites who are enabling peoples of color to displace the lives and livelihoods and even electoral power of white people who apparently therefore need authoritarian protection. And so when we hear phrases like immigrants are invading the nation, we're hearing Great Replacement theory, or diversity programs are discriminatory, or there's an internal enemy. We're hearing a theory that's trying to get people to believe they need protection, they need someone to save them. And then the authoritarian comes around and says, I will protect you and I will save you by snatching your freedoms and rights.
Storytelling for social change, only on KPFA.
Base Command, all systems go. We are go for launch.
This is when KPFA music takes over. Raw, eclectic, real. No playlist algorithms, no corporate formatting. Just sound that moves, shifts, and surprises. Jazz bleeding into cumbia. Folk crashing into noise. The underground rising to the surface. No two nights are ever the same on KPFA. Throttle up. This night has no ceiling. Find your groove at 94.1 FM, kpfa.org.
KPFA broadcast engaged, holding steady.
This is 94.1 KPFA and 89.3 KPFB in Berkeley, 88.1 KFCF in Fresno, everywhere at kpfa.org.